Welcome back to Bootstrap Cinema. It's kind of fun, actually. I don't have a lot to talk about this week, but last week, went through and got my audio space set up. I've changed it only very slightly this week. I have my mic a little bit closer, but I've got all the sound treatment up. It's noisy outside a little earlier than last week, so cars driving by and my kids are downstairs. But I had an interesting experience, an observation, as I was attempting to do something I'd never done before, and that was using the color checker. I used the feature in DaVinci Resolve that lets you basically match against all these colors, and it'll do the adjustments to make it look like it should. And I did that, and I thought this is gonna be great because I had two camera angles, two different cameras that behave a little differently. And I noticed this really weird, this really weird thing with the reds, the color in my mouth. It was like really vibrant red, like this red. It was like way too red. And I was like, well, that's weird. Ultimately, I decided to let it go. It actually added a little drama to my choking sequence when I was having a hard time talking because there's something in my throat. And my face like turned that really beet red color. It was really weird, but I was like, what's going on? Shouldn't this make my colors look natural and normal? And it's not doing that. So I want to talk about what I learned. So much for me to learn. I need a good book on the topic. Of course, then I won't read it. I need a tutor, a mentor on color grading. But let me get this set up right. There we go. So I held this thing up in the camera, and I used the DaVinci Resolve tool to match the colors, and I thought everything was fine, but then I noticed that odd issue. Well, the issue, it turns out, is that it's really simple. I matched against the wrong color checker. There's two of these suckers from X-Ray, and I don't know if you can read that. It's not going to focus. There we go. Yeah, so this is the Color Checker Classic. So that's fine. It's a good color checker, and it's been well cared for, so it should do the job. But in DaVinci Resolve, when I pulled up the tool for color checking, it defaults to the Color Checker Classic Legacy, and the colors that are on the Legacy are much brighter than the colors on the on this Classic. And so I think what was happening, because I had the wrong one, naturally it's going to try and make it look like it was the one that I told it was. The red in particular here is more subdued on this color checker than it is on the Classic Legacy. And so it took these reds to a really interesting place, and the rest of it, I'm not that much of a color guy, so I'm not a color guy, so I don't really notice unless it's very extreme. It was only the reds that really popped out at me. Anyway, just for fun, I'll do it again. Here's what it looks like with the Classic Legacy. I don't know if my mouth is as red as it was last week. Anyway, and then here's what it looks like with just the Classic. Hopefully it's more natural. I played around with it a little bit after the fact, trying to figure it out, and I still felt like the colors were a bit off for the reds, but I don't know, maybe I was just particularly red that day, I don't know. So it'll be interesting to see what this looks like, and obviously I'm not doing that while I'm recording this, so I don't know. We'll try it. In other news, Touch is moving along. I finished the first draft of the rewrite of episode 1, episode 1's first act. It's about 15. It actually nailed it right on 15 pages, which was my goal. And asked a couple people to read it. My wife had me read it to her. She had some interesting feedback. Darce didn't get a copy in time, so he didn't read it. Jefferson looked at it and had some feedback. Everybody else didn't have time, so they didn't read it, which is okay. But then I had my meeting with Jefferson and Darce. We talked through it, and there's still a couple things I'm working on. and I'm not prepared to share it. I think next week I'm hoping to do a cold reading. It won't be cold for me. It's been in the works for a while, but do a cold reading of that first act. I think I can do that next week. But I have a couple things I'm still working on. And I think that one of the things that has really come home for me in this writing process is how important it is to understand the broader context of all the things that influence the script. I've had a number of these that have really come to challenge me. One is the relationship between Dr. Reisman and Kent, Sarah and Kent. We talked about that previously, but I had to come up with a backstory. Like, what is their history and why are they saying the things they are the way they are? And wow, that really helped. And then in this last review afterwards, I realized that part of Kent's hacktivists discovering that there's a government cover-up of this disease, I suddenly realized, how am I going to write about a government cover-up if I really don't even know how it works? And so that's something I'm working on this week. I have spent a little bit of time researching. I'm not quite sure how to do it. Like, I did the Aaron Sorkin masterclass, and he's talking to field experts. Well, I don't know who I would call and say, hey, you are the preeminent expert in government, in implementing government cover-ups. This is not a conspiracy theory, mind you. The government actually is covering this thing up because they're trying to prevent a bigger crisis by the public overreacting. So they're trying to get some things in place before they tell them what's really going on, because by their estimation, fewer lives will be lost by taking that course of action. So in that respect, it's probably arguably the right thing for the government to do. But I don't really know how the government would do that. And I guess I can make it up to some extent, but is it really believable? Has the government ever done that? If they did it well, I guess we would never know, right? Anyway, I'm working on that. I'm also, there's just a couple little points. One really interesting one that came up from both Jefferson and my wife was that somehow I managed to not really say what it was Kent was discovering that really freaked him out, because I've got this very, like, Kent just churning, trying to figure out what the heck is going on because the world is falling apart. Like, what is happening? He's heard some really alarming news, but somehow I failed to actually convey that in the first act, and I need to put that in. It's just kind of interesting. And here's my final note. My monitor just decided that I had entered into a settings. This is the Blackmagic HDR 12G. I think they just had a firmware update for that. But just suddenly it's like in the settings, just automatically. It's weird. The camera says it's recording. We'll see. My final note. I might have been distracted by this monitor. It was going to be a good one. Or maybe not, since I forgot it already. It was a personal note. I sense a cut here, and then we come back when I figure out what it is. Oh, I remember. There's this interesting incentive structure in writing that I'm experiencing where it's really easy for me to sit down and write the kind of the story and even put dialogue, and it's fully there in a technical sense. But it's flat. It's not nuanced. It's not it's just not good, which is what I got on my first write of episode 101. I think that in reading it, even before I start really dove into this process of getting feedback and studying more about screenwriting, which I'm still very, very, very beginner in, I could look at it and I knew that it wasn't all that. However, there's this incentive not to acknowledge it because if you acknowledge that it sucks, you know you've got to go back and work on it. You have to figure it out and rewrite it. And one of the things that really slowed me down, there were certain things somebody would be like, hey, it doesn't really make sense. Okay, well, what if I put it like this? Yeah, okay, that makes more sense. Just tweak a little line of dialogue or something. But if somebody came back with, it doesn't make sense that would happen on that particular day of the week, or I had a case where I'd written one of the characters to be going to church on Saturday, which is something from my personal history. I'm Seventh-day Adventist. But it's not about being some particular denomination. It's just, in that case, it was a story about somebody who was a Christian pastor, right? His Seth is a Christian pastor. And it doesn't really matter what denomination it is. And since most everybody goes to church on Sunday, by putting it on Saturday, it's like, oh, well, that's weird. There must be some meaning in it, except there's not any meaning in it for the case of the story. Therefore, I should change it. But that had some implications, because now they're going to church on Sunday instead of going to church on Saturday. And I had this timeline of when things happen. I'm like, I got to change it all. And I had a strong desire to not have to change it. I wanted it to be done already. And I guess it's really coming down to patience. I think what I'm learning more than anything is that this is a process of making many attempts and learning to listen to that inner voice that goes, it still sucks. That piece, that line maybe even, and it's not just a line of dialogue, it can be a line of action. And I had that this last meeting with Jefferson Darcy. There's this one line of action that I just hated. And I didn't know why, but I knew I didn't like it. Maybe it stood out more. And so as I'm developing the sensitivity, it really stood out for me. And I brought some attention to it, and we talked it through and figured something out. But I think that is maybe the single most critical skill to develop, is the ability to acknowledge that you yourself are not satisfied with something, and not to feel like you have to make any judgment about the cost of changing it or how inconvenient it is, but just simply acknowledge that it's going to have to change. It's not good enough. I have no idea when this thing's going to turn into something. I have hoped many times that I was almost done and that we can start shooting, or at least planning to shoot it. I have visions of fundraising, getting my friends and family to all contribute and support, making the trailer. And this is a show I want to see. I don't know if it's a show everybody else will want to see, but I want to try anyway. But I think all of that stuff, all of that desire to have it already, puts this pressure to be impatient, and that probably more than anything would be the very thing that destroyed it, or that will destroy it if I let it get in the way of taking the time and getting it right. I'm not working on this full time. It's a side project, and in some respects I think that's good, because it really gives me time to get away from it and then come back with a fresh perspective. Anyway, that's it. Thanks for tuning in, Bootstrap Cinema. And I liked my sign off last week, where, what was it? Where we don't know what we're doing, but we do it anyway. Yeah, might be a slogan. We'll try it a couple more times.